You've probably seen the Eiffel Tower thousands of times. But have you ever wondered what's actually inside this giant iron structure? From the outside, it looks like a massive tower made of crisscrossing metal beams. But hidden inside are floors, restaurants, elevators, stairways, machinery, and an entire network of structures working together. So today, we're going inside the Eiffel Tower to see what makes this famous landmark work. And to understand what's inside it, we first need to go back to Paris in the late 1800s. Construction of the Eiffel Tower began in 1887 as part of preparations for the 1889 World's Fair. The project was designed to demonstrate what modern engineering and metal construction could achieve at the time. The tower wasn't built from one enormous piece of metal. Thousands of individual iron components were manufactured, brought to the construction site, and assembled piece by piece. The main metal structure took only about 21 months to assemble. And when it was completed in 1889, the Eiffel Tower stood about 300 meters tall. For its time, that was an astonishing height. But here's the interesting part. The Eiffel Tower wasn't originally supposed to stay forever. It was designed as a temporary structure with plans for it to stand for about 20 years. More than a century later, it's still standing. And today, we're going to look beyond the famous silhouette and see what's actually hidden inside.
Now that we know how the Eiffel Tower was built, let's take a closer look at its size and layout. From the ground, the tower looks enormous. But what makes it even more interesting is that it's not just one giant open structure. Inside the tower are 3 main visitor levels, each with a completely different layout. The first floor is about 57 meters above the ground, making it the largest of the 3 levels. It has restaurants, shops, exhibition spaces, and areas where visitors can learn more about the tower. There's also something that makes this floor especially exciting. Part of the floor is made from glass, so when you stand on it, you can look straight down through the structure toward the ground. And if you're not a fan of heights, that's probably not the place you want to look for too long. Above it is the second floor, at around 115 meters. This level is smaller, but it has some of the best views of Paris. It also contains the famous Jules Verne restaurant, located in the south pillar. Then there's the third floor, much higher at around 276 meters. This level is much smaller, with a total area of only about 250 square meters. Most of the space here is dedicated to viewing the city from high above, and from this height, Paris looks completely different. But getting between these levels isn't as simple as walking through a normal building, because the Eiffel Tower doesn't have one central elevator shaft. Instead, some of its elevators actually travel inside the 4 giant legs of the tower, and that's where things get really interesting.
Now let's take a closer look at one of the most unusual parts of the Eiffel Tower, its elevators. Unlike a normal building, the elevators in the tower don't simply move straight up and down. Some of the main visitor elevators actually travel inside the tower's huge sloping legs. Each of the 4 legs has an elevator system, although the visitor elevators are located in the north, east, and west pillars. The elevator machinery is hidden down near the bases of the tower, beneath the platforms. From there, powerful systems move the elevator cabins along their tracks inside the iron structure. But here's what makes these elevators really interesting. Their cabins have to stay level while the track itself changes angle as it climbs. The journey starts at a relatively gentle angle, then becomes much steeper as the elevator approaches the second floor. So instead of simply moving vertically, the cabin follows the shape of the tower while keeping passengers upright. And these elevators are not just moving a few people at a time. They carry huge numbers of visitors every day,
making them one of the most important mechanical systems inside the entire tower.
But the main visitor elevators aren't the only elevators inside the Eiffel Tower. The south pillar has its own elevator systems, designed for very different purposes. One of them is a service elevator used by the people who work inside the tower. Another elevator takes visitors directly to the Jules Verne restaurant on the second floor. Unlike the main sloping elevators, this system provides direct access to the restaurant from the ground level. But getting to the very top of the Eiffel Tower requires another system entirely. Deep inside the center of the tower, there are additional elevators that travel vertically. These elevators are arranged in pairs, helping balance the loads as they move through the structure. Originally, reaching the top was a much more complicated journey. When the tower first opened, visitors couldn't simply take one elevator all the way to the top. They had to ride one elevator part of the way, get out, and then transfer to another elevator. Today, the system is much more convenient. Visitors travel to the second floor, then transfer to another elevator that takes them up to the summit. And when you look at the tiny elevator cabin moving through this enormous iron structure, it's easy to forget just how much engineering is happening behind the scenes.
We've reached the very top of the Eiffel Tower, and this is where the tower becomes much more than just a viewing platform. At around 276 meters above the ground, the summit contains a much smaller and more restricted space than the floors below. One of the most interesting things hidden up here is the private apartment that Gustave Eiffel had built for himself. It wasn't a huge luxury apartment. It was a relatively small space, designed as a private retreat where Eiffel could work, rest, and meet important visitors. The apartment even became famous among the people of Paris, and Gustave Eiffel reportedly received requests from people who wanted to rent it, but he refused. Today, the space has been preserved as part of the history of the tower, with figures and furniture recreating what it looked like during Eiffel's time. Just above the summit, you'll also find another important part of the tower's modern purpose: communication equipment. Antennas at the top are used for radio and television broadcasting.
And this is one of the reasons the Eiffel Tower survived long after it was supposed to be dismantled. Its height made it extremely useful for transmitting radio signals across Paris and beyond. So when you look at the Eiffel Tower, you're not just looking at an old monument. You're looking at a giant iron structure that became a landmark, a transportation system, a viewing platform, and even a communications tower. And after more than a century, the most impressive thing about it might be that so much of this engineering is still hidden inside the structure. That's what's really inside the Eiffel Tower.